Now I want to go back to this thing about the terrorist statistics thing that I did the other day, when I talked about a 2009 EU study. According to the last 2010 EU terrorism situation and trends report, right? And then he decides to sort of bring up a load of incidents that happened in a completely different year to the one I was mentioning in the study.
As you're halfway through your meal, you suddenly recognize a man at a nearby table. He's an author. His name is Salman Rushdie. What do you do?
Depends on my mood that evening. I mean, I may concentrate more on my meal, or I may concentrate on the... I can't answer that very clearly.
You don't think that this man deserves to die?
Who? Salman Rushdie?
Yes.
Yes, yes.
And do you have a duty to be his executioner?
No, not necessarily, unless we were in an Islamic state and I was ordered, let's say, by the judge or by the authority to carry out such an act, perhaps, yes.
Obviously, Yusuf Islam is a loon, but how many people has Yusuf himself killed? Let's go a step further. All of those people who voted for wars that have killed lots of people, blown off body parts, ruining their lives, prevented lots of economic advancement. Okay, how many of those people who voted for those things or supported those things in some way, how many people did they actually kill themselves directly? Typically none. Okay, most people don't kill other people. If that were the case in the world population, then we wouldn't have a world population problem. We'd have other problems. So typically none. Now, how many killings has the average Muslim actually directly done? Well, like, the war supporter, typically none. Now, hopefully you can see the irrelevance of this fact, especially once you realize that all acts of state are acts of war and all laws are violently enforced. Coughlan made a video, a really bad video, so let's get to it.
I've done lots of videos recently about the EDL, BNP and Geert Wilders and such. As a result of that, I obviously get accused of being a terrorist apologist.
Huge straw man right out of the gate. You get accused of being a Muslim apologist. Not a terrorist apologist, a Muslim apologist, for doing things like falsely interpreting the Quran in a way that is always favorable to Muslims and citing bogus European Union reports that claims there's only been one Muslim who's engaged in a terrorist attack. Now, I'm going to get into that later on in this video. I'm not just going to assert that here. I'm going to defend my position in this video. But right now I'm just saying, Coughlan, don't confuse the issue. Nobody is claiming that you are defending Muslim violence, but that you are irrationally defending Islam by denying it.
There seems to be this idea amongst people that because I point out certain things in videos that may sort of suggest that no, not all Muslims are nutters, and they don't all hate your freedom, and they don't all
want to kill you, and they don't all want to chop your head off, and they don't all see you as some fucking worthless piece of scum, and they don't all want to fucking live under Sharia law and subjugate you.
That all of a sudden I'm suddenly denying that there's anything evil or bad or wrong ever done in the name of Islam. No, I am fucking not.
This is another mischaracterization of your critics. Of course there has been bad things done in the name of virtually everything. That's not the argument that is being applied to Islam. Moreover, Coughlan, your argument that you make, you can say the same thing about American Baptist fundamentalists and say that they're not all bad. Or you can make the same argument about communists, right? Many communists are very nice guys. Okay. Most communists have not engaged in actual violent acts. But if communists take over a country, without fail, they will run it into the ground, and there will be much misery and woe and starvation and ruining of all that you have built up. Okay. Now, if you look at prosperous Muslim countries like the United Arab Emirates, They became prosperous by limiting the effect Islam has on their law and business environment. That is, the limitation of Islam has positive effects in the same way the limitation of Christianity had positive effects for Europe, which kind of destroyed the central pillar, the main justification for feudalism, which supposedly the Pope was at the top of. And if you look throughout the history of the Muslim world, when they were less Muslim, when they cited the Quran less, the Muslim world was more prosperous. Okay, and so by being Islamophobic, you are speaking or acting out against the influence of Islam. Similar, in the same way, being Christianophobic or whatever it is speaking out or acting out against the influence of Christianity. So in a sense, the United Arab Emirates is more Islamophobic than Iran. And because of this, they have been rewarded with prosperity. Now, you say that they don't all want Sharia law. Well, I don't know who said that. I don't know of anyone who said that virtually all Muslims want Sharia law. I said that about half do. And that's all that I've heard anyone else say. And they already have it in Britain in small areas for people who agree to it. Now, Muslims don't need to become a majority to have an influence on politics. And hopefully you can agree that a Muslim influence on politics is not a good thing.
But there are enough people pointing that stuff out, right? There are enough people saying that those things are or are not happening, right? And it's nice to have a bit of balance occasionally.
Well, that's your opinion, right? It's not truth, right? It's your opinion. It is your opinion that there are enough people pointing this stuff out and that you need to have some balance. Well, maybe the media is saturated. The media in Europe, not in Muslim world, but in Europe, maybe the media is saturated with anti-Islam stories. Well, in my opinion, it needs to be saturated more. Okay, and in my opinion, not enough people are pointing these things out. Okay, and the reason I say this is that the Muslim population is still growing and spreading. Okay, into India, Spain, France, Britain, if I recall correctly, the Philippines, Thailand, and Malaysia. And so in my opinion, we can say that there are enough people pointing out the problems with Islam as soon as the global Muslim population starts to decline in absolute terms. Okay? Like, you're kind of ignoring the problem here. Right? The problem here is not, what's going on in the media, what's going on in the media. Okay? It's about what's happening on the ground. And just saying, well, there's 100 times more anti-Muslim stories. There's 100 anti-Muslim story for every one Muslim story. Well, so what? The Muslim population is still growing, right? And in Britain, it's still becoming more radical. So, you're changing your judgment to the wrong metric.
I am not obliged to sit here and say, oh, by the way, there are Muslims keep it. Yeah, I know that.
Nobody is saying that you're obliged to say anything, okay? You're saying dumb things, and people are responding to what you say. And this thing that Coughlan did, this is a weasel tactic, right? Coughlan's trying to imply that his critics are saying that he is obliged to only say certain things or speak within a certain box. No, we are not saying you are obliged to only say certain things. You say your things, and dare I say, quote, we, close quote, respond. Okay? Nobody is forcing some standards upon you or thinking that we are entitled to a certain discourse within our comfort zone. Okay? But we are just responding to what you're saying. That's what's happening. Nobody's claiming that you are obliged to say X.
Now I want to go back to this thing about the terrorist statistics thing that I did the other day, when I talked about a 2009 EU study.
It was a 2010 study.
That showed that in 2009, only one of all the foiled, failed, or carried out terrorist attacks in Europe, one was a Muslim. One was done by a Muslim. I had a couple of responses to this. One of them was from a user called Fringe Elements, aka Stodels. Now, I don't normally... Now, I've had people constantly asking me about what Stodels said in his video. Am I going to respond? I originally didn't want to, because I don't fucking like Stodels.
Well, first off, join the club. Lots of people hate me. Second off, Stodels was a username that I created 4 years ago, and I have no idea why people insist on using that stupid username.
Okay? First of all, I don't buy that he's no longer a white nationalist. I don't buy it, but then that doesn't really matter.
Well, just in self-defense here, I was also a fundamentalist Baptist, okay, and because of this, I suppressed my homosexuality, and I've been in favor of open borders in regards to Latin American immigrants to the U.S. For the past 2 years. And also, I was still in high school when I called myself a white nationalist, and that whole episode was about 3.5 years ago. I don't know what else I can say about this. I don't know how much time has to elapse. I don't know what my public positions have to be. Like, I mean, you could always say, well, he's just saying that, but deep, you know, what's going on between his ears is something really horribly racist. Well, I mean, there's no way to falsify that. And I'll make a deal with you, Coughlan. Not that a deal that we have would even matter, but how about we do a 2-for-1 deal, okay? So in the UK, let's say the UK involuntarily deports one Muslim, right? By force, don't ask them, it's not helping them leave. No, it's forcing them to leave, dump them on the shores of Morocco or whatever. Okay, involuntarily deport one Muslim, but imports 2 Hindis. And if you want, it can be the darkest of the darkiest skin Hindis. Right? And at the end of this forced emigration, Britain will have twice as many brown people as before. Right? And if you look at Hindis, they're very dark, so maybe even twice as many in total number, but in terms of total darkness, it's even more. And there will be 0 Muslims. And so this policy, this 2-for-1 policy, and this would also work as a litmus test, right? Is the issue Islam, or is it race? Okay? And so I think this whole 2-for-1 thing is a great thing, because it will make Britain more multicultural for all the people who love multiculturalism for its own sake, whatever. And it will deal with the Muslim problem.
Because going to his video, if I go to his video, first of all he decides to say that the study I used, he rejects it out of hand and says it's not a good study. He then chooses to redefine terrorism as something else, which it isn't.
Wrong. Let's look at the report itself, which I have linked. On page 9, this is what it says, quote, terrorist offenses have been defined as indicated in Article 1 of the Council Framework Decision on Combating Terrorism of 13th June 2002. Okay, so let's find this Article 1 of the Council Framework Decision. All right, and I have that linked, and here's what it says. Quote, the Framework Decision harmonizes the definition of terrorist offenses in all EU countries by introducing a specific and common definition. Well, that's a lie there. As you're going to read, it's not very specific at all. It's a concept of terrorism is a combination of 2 elements. Typo there. An objective element, as it refers to a list of instances of serious criminal conduct, murder, bodily injuries, hostage-taking, extortion, fabrication of weapons, committing attacks, threatening to commit any of the above, etc., and a subjective element, as these acts are deemed to be terrorist offenses when committed with the aim of seriously intimidating a population, unduly compelling a government or international organization to perform or abstain from performing any act, or seriously destabilizing or destroying the fundamental political, constitutional, economic, or social structures of a country or an international organization. Now, that is subjective. When Muslims pour gasoline on an actress, it appears, I infer an intent that they're burning her for insulting Islam, and I infer, rightly or wrongly, that this act is meant as a warning to others. And certainly such an event would be on the news and would create a chilling effect. Now, I don't know what was really going on right between their ears, okay, but I'm inferring some sort of a political calculation, even if a very crude one. So sorry, Coughlan, I didn't change the definition. You know, you may think that what I'm citing is debatable, but it is debatable, right? It's not me changing the definition. But anyway, here are some even less ambiguous examples. There was we had the bombing in Stockholm. There was a letter bomb that was meant to be sent to Gillen's Posten, or Hillens, I don't know how to pronounce it, Gillen's Posten. That failed and blew the guy up. There was a suicide bomber in North Ossetia, Russia. And then there was a bombing in a marketplace in Vladikavkaz, Russia. All right. So there's 4 right there. And those are all unambiguous. Now, I didn't do some major study on this, okay? But there's the definition. I think my examples fit their definition of terrorism. But even if you don't think so, well, there's my 4 unambiguous cases. Oh, clearly unambiguous cases of what would be considered terrorism. And to the viewer watching this, my point here is that the EU report was bullshit by a very, very, very wide margin. That's the point of this. All right, I'm not saying that these are the only 4 terrorist attacks that occurred in Europe. My guess is there are quite a few more. I'm just trying to say there's more than one. There's clearly 4. Okay, so my main point in the original video I made to Coughlan, and in this video, is that the main problem with Islam is not the bombings or politically motivated killings, but the political impact of Islam when Muslims take over an area. Similarly, the problem with communism is not the political violence of communists out of power. Okay, the problem with communists is when they're in power. Same with Islam. Now, let's say Muslims reach 20% of Britain's population. That's a big voting bloc. So whoever caters to that voting bloc can get their votes. Today, if I recall correctly, there are areas in Britain where Sharia law exists if 2 individuals consent to it. So, if you want to get the Muslim vote, what you can say is you can say, well, here, if you vote for me, right, because let's say an election's tight and they want to appeal to the Muslim voting bloc, if you vote for me, I will allow Sharia law in a fiat land claim, in a forced Sharia law in an area. Not polycentric law, not choose your own law and try to harmonize and get along with various legal constructs, right? But Sharia law in an area and no other law. So this is going to be a Sharia law zone, right? And so you can have, Islam, Britain have a whole bunch of Sharia law zones popping out all over the place as a result of people trying to cater to the Islamic voting bloc. Okay. So that's something that could really exist, and it can force people, out of their homes, out of their neighborhoods, and also cause a lot of those places to become slums, right? And of course, those people could then vote themselves other people's money as a result of the economic decline that comes from Sharia law, and it comes from economic decline that comes from religious influence in law and business practices. So that's what you're looking at. Maybe one day, way, way, way off in the future, Muslims could become a majority of Britain. And in that situation, things would be really bad. But, you can have lots of problems way before that. Christianity is tame and getting tamer. Islam is radical and getting more radical. This is not about what the books say. Okay, so all those people who say, well, this is not what Islam actually says, don't care. Okay? If self-proclaimed Christians, for example, tried to actually follow the Bible, right, they would be calling for lots and lots of mass murder. Right, kind of like I did when I followed the Bible. All right, I'm only 2 minutes and 26 seconds into a terrible Coughlan video, and so I'm calling it quits now. I seriously doubt Coughlan said anything else noteworthy, but before I go, let me just dissect this little comment that Coughlan left here that I found. He says, if I was to sit down and write out every label or name I've been called, it would cover every single position or point of view on every single political, social, or religious spectrum you can think of. Really. Now, this right here, this is just a lesson here. This is a very Weasley little tactic. Okay, he's trying to imply that he's some maverick, and so unreasonable people from all sides are attacking him, right? Because all across the spectrum, the ideologues are all attacking him while he's the reasonable maverick. That's the implication of this statement. Now, first off, that statement is unfalsifiable. Okay. Second off, so what? If you get big enough, eventually you're going to be called everything, right? Just as Chomsky was called right-wing. But nobody who isn't retarded would call Chomsky a rightist, in the way the term right is commonly used. So, what are you generally accused of, Coughlan? Are you generally accused of being a Nazi? Are you generally accused of being a neocon? No, you are generally accused of being a Muslim ball licker. Don't try to pretend you're a maverick, because you're not.